I'm not usually used to using a microphone, but I'll give it a try, and if I might end up abandoning it, we'll see. So thanks for having me, and I am actually a member of the Friends of the Edmonds Library, so when she asked for me to stand up, I was like, I want to say, I'm a member! So how many in the people in the room, I know it sounds like half of the people who work for My Edmonds News are in the room, or half the room is My Edmonds News, but I don't think it's quite that heavy a percentage. But how many people in the room read My Edmonds News at least somewhat regularly? Oh, great news, thank you. And this is going to sound like and then how many of you receive the daily newsletter that we send out every morning so that you can know? Yeah. And how many of you read that daily newsletter, which comes out at 4 a.m., while doing something else? Yes. I had one gentleman tell me that he reads it in the morning. I don't know if he's here. Reads it in the morning while he's shaving. He has his phone in one hand, his razor in the other, and he's reading. So I'm going to put this away because it's bothering me. So can you hear me if I don't use the microphone? Am I loud enough?
Oh, yes.
Yes, thank you. Because that way I don't have to, I probably should turn it on. Yeah, because that way I don't have to be restricted, and I don't like that. So the other question I have is, how many of you have submitted a comment to My Edmonds News in the comment section? Beautiful. The reason why that's so important to me is because that's why I started My Edmonds News in the first place. I wanted it to be, our saying, our tagline on the front of the website is an online gathering place for neighbors and friends. And that, frankly, was my whole reason. There's a lot of one-way communication out there. You know, the newspaper you can print, and you might pick it up and read it, and there might be a letter to the editor or two. But the idea of being able to talk with your neighbors and your friends and people maybe you don't ever want to be your friends about something going on in town is really important. I think it increases the connectedness to the community. It allows people to share their ideas. It allows us to find solutions and hopefully have a rather, and I know it's not always the case, but a somewhat diplomatic discussion. Now, I did a couple years ago implement a policy of requiring people to use their real names, and I try to enforce that as much as possible. I can't ever guarantee 100% that I know who's writing, but I try to do some investigation on who's writing so that I make sure they're real. And I did that because I wanted to increase the level of diplomacy or respectfulness. And you know, people still express their opinions, and you know, and I know those are some of the favorite comments when people have their dialogue back and forth. But that is part of why I started it, and I wanted to explain a little bit about me and why. So I've lived in Edmonds for almost 30 years, and my husband and I came here, bought our first house over by Lake Ballinger, and we actually still live in that neighborhood. Love it over there, and it's kind of nice to have that perspective because I come here and I love downtown Edmonds and I love the bowl, but as I think I said, I don't know if Jim Underhill is here, we were just in a meeting with him, but he's the Highway 99 task force guy, and he and I have these conversations about how Edmonds has many neighborhoods besides the bowl, and I love to be able to represent all those neighborhoods, and for me, not living in downtown Edmonds was great because I could kind of feel like I was representing everybody. And I have been in journalism all of my life, on and off in newspaper or that type of work. I've also done some other communications jobs. But my story is that I had been laid off from my job in 2009 and didn't really know what I was going to do next. I was taking, a look around for other jobs. My husband said to me, he was working in Mount Lake Terrace. He has an office there just across Lake Ballinger from where we live. And he said to me, there's this online website in Mount Lake Terrace. And I think you should start one in Edmonds. And if you don't do it, somebody else is. And I thought, well, why not? I have the interest, I have the time, and I had a background in technology too. I worked for an internet startup a few years before. So I took the plunge. I don't know how many of you know what WordPress is, but it's basically a platform that a lot of people who just don't really know web back-end technology, like HTML and all that crazy technical stuff, you can just put up a website. And so I started it, and it was easy. And I thought, well, okay, now I have to start covering things in town. And I had been a community journalist for years, on and off, so it wasn't like I didn't know how to do that. But I have a confession to make. I had lived in Edmonds for all those years, raised my kids here. They went to Edmonds schools. I had never once been to a city council meeting. Now, that's probably not a shock. I mean, there are probably some of you who would never go to an Edmonds city don't want to go. Mr. Rutledge back there, thank you for going to all of them. We know there's some of you who are very dedicated, and we appreciate you. But most people don't, right? But I thought, you know, my only connection in this whole time of living in Edmonds was through the schools. That was how I got to know the community, because my kids went to Edmonds schools. But I knew who the mayor was, and I sort of knew who the city council members were, but I'd never been to a meeting. So I started going, and I started writing about it. And then some of the city council members and the mayor started noticing that I was writing about them. And yes. And then comments started coming in because people realized not only could they read about what was going on, but they could actually talk about it. And what a concept, right? To be able to connect with your neighbors about things that are going on that matter and how they're spending their money and all that other stuff. So after a few months, I started seeing the traffic pick up because we can measure, you know, how many visitors come in and read the different things that are going on. And I thought, well, you know, I still haven't found a job yet, and maybe I can make a little money off this. Maybe I can sell some advertising. So I started doing a little bit of that. I found that there were some people who wanted to advertise. And I know there's some current sponsors in this room, and I thank you very much because I really appreciate you, MS Helping Hands being one. Longtime advertiser, thank you very much. So that whole thing started to take off a little bit. And then something really interesting happened. The comments that came in were on a variety of different topics, but city government seemed to be one of them. In May of 2010, no, April of 2010, I think, approximately. Harry, correct me on dates if I'm wrong.
That's right.
The Edmonds City Council was considering buying this little piece of land down here by the Edmonds Ferry Terminal where the Skipper's restaurant was. That created quite a stir. And there were a lot of people who weren't really happy about that. A $1.1 million purchase that they didn't really have a firm plan on what they were going to do with. And the city, of course, was in bad financial shape. So people were kind of wondering why they would want to do that. And the comments just kept going on and on. And I thought, well, I'm just going to put up a poll that asks people what, you know, they think about this. And we had 400 responses. Well, that's pretty good out of a town of 40,000. Vast majority, I would add, against this concept. And I have called upon my friends, Doug and Carol, who normally talk about cooking, to read a couple of select comments from that time, just to give you a flavor of what it is to be an online gathering place. Doug?
Sure. Steve Shelton, are you here? Good.
That'd be funny if he was.
Yeah. He wrote on April 24th, 2010, no vision, no plan, no citizen input, no money. No question that the Skipper's site is a piece of land with a very strategic location, and the cost to acquire it has dropped, as has all real estate. Now, how about pulling back on the purchase? Formulating a plan, a vision that can gain support, and securing a funding source? As presented, the ready, fire, aim approach is irresponsible and violates the public trust. Shame on the 5... Are there any council members here?
I think there is, but she wasn't there. So
Shame on the 5 council members for their attempted end run.
thank you. And Carol, one more, a shorter response.
A shorter response. So I have to see if there's a Stone Nishino.
Yeah, Nishino. Stone Nishino.
Nishino. So on April 24th, he said, a 1.1 million flower pot. The city doesn't have money for transportation overlays, not to mention transportation improvements. Additionally, we are facing a revenue crisis. How is spending 1.1 million to create a big flower pot going to bring in revenue and solve existing basic needs?
So those are the kinds of things that came out, and there were some that were probably not really very readable. I don't allow profanity, but there were some comments that were probably not even really worth reading. But the point is that that's the kind of thing that I'm trying to do here, and it is way different than most sites. I mean, you can go to the Seattle Times, which, by the way, is an online partner of mine, and I'll get into that in a moment. But they don't, and I understand why. They get hundreds and hundreds of comments on their stories every day. They don't require real names. And the result is that it's a free-for-all. and people say things that they would never say to you face to face. And that has always been my commitment. I want to keep the dialogue as constructive as possible. It doesn't mean that you can't express your opinion, but there is no value in just having people randomly start going off on other people and being spiteful. And that's really what I'm trying to avoid by requiring people to use their names, and so that people know who they're talking to, even if it's not face-to-face. So I told you why I started it. We've come a long way since fall of 2009. Just to give you an idea of our growth, had about, starting out, probably about 100 to 200 unique visitors a day, and basically that means individual people coming to the site, one person, and they can track that through an IP address of the computer itself, coming to the site every day. That was, in the initial few months. We're now up to about 3,000 unique visitors a day on My Edmonds News, which is great, and about 80,000 a month. So that helps in a lot of ways. It knows that I'm making a difference. It helps in terms of selling advertising because we are able to tell advertisers they really do have an audience. Which is really nice. And Maggie, by the way, that's her job. So if any of you have a business, a little shameless plug, that's what she does. And she's only been with me for 2 months, and she's doing a fabulous job. So I'm really excited to have her on board. So that kind of growth has happened. Obviously, when I first started out, this online news thing, of course, is still relatively new. And those of us who are in the business are still trying to figure out how it's going to work. And I'll explain probably a little bit more about that in a while. But the tricky part about it is, the legitimacy of it. People think bloggers and they think these wild-eyed, crazy people who run around, doing things that aren't really credible. And that is not what we're about at all. I have a journalism degree. I've been in that world for a long time, and my whole purpose as a community journalist is to bring the community together, but it doesn't mean that I shy away from covering things that need to be covered. I just always try to do it through the filter of being very responsible and respectful of the people involved, and telling as much as possible all sides of the issue. So the Seattle Times, when these online news sites started popping up, and their revenue pool was shrinking because, as you all know, newspapers are closing right and left. Classified ads have gone away. A lot of their revenue sources have gone away. And the Seattle Times basically got rid of all their suburban bureaus. They used to have a Snohomish County bureau here, and they had a reporter who was dedicated to that, and they do not have that anymore, in addition to Bellevue and a bunch of other communities. So they were looking at how they could still have some neighborhood coverage, and they saw all these online sites popping up, and they thought, well, that would be a great possible solution. So they actually created partnerships with different sites, and My Edmonds News was one of them. And what that means is that they link to me on their homepage. There's a community partner link, and then they feature 5 to 6 stories a day. And whenever that happens, whenever they see a story that they think is interesting that they want to link on their homepage, of course, my site traffic about doubles, which is awesome. But they're getting free coverage, so I think that's pretty good for them too, so it's a win-win. But when I say this whole world is new, it truly is, because we don't really know, those of us who are in the online publishing business, and we all network with each other. There are 100 of us or so across the United States and a lot of them are laid-off journalists. I won't lie about that. They are people who lost their jobs, and they're very well-respected journalists who can't find work, and so they start up these online sites. But we're all, we're journalists, so we're not business people, and that's been the biggest challenge. It's like, how do you pay yourself to do this work? Because we can't go on in this world working for free forever or working for no money forever, and it's such an important thing to do. I was telling somebody earlier today, yes, I want to figure out how to make money and I want to make a living, but bigger picture is, our society was founded on this cornerstone of free press and getting the information out. And how do you know if those people in City Hall are spending your money wisely? How do you know if the school district is doing what it's supposed to do? And I'm not saying it's all bad, but the point is, if we don't have somebody covering those kinds of things and being there, how are we going to know if, how are you all going to know? Are you going to all go to the council meetings? Probably not. Are you going to sit and look through all the meeting minutes? Probably not. It's important, and I believe in it. And yet, we have investigative reporter pools across the nation shrinking. Newspapers don't do that anymore, and the reason they don't do it anymore is because it's too expensive. They can't afford to have a reporter who does one story a year, paying them $60 or $70 or $80,000. They just can't afford it. And so that's going away. And how many scandals and important things to you and me have been uncovered over the years because there was investigative journalism. So not to get too hard and heavy or a downer, but the point is, what we do here, just even on a community level, is really important, and I believe in it. And that's why I'm here, trying to figure it out, as are many of us in local communities across the country who have online-only websites, trying to figure out how we make it work long-term and create a model that people who come behind us will be able to create. Because frankly, I think we're just going to, this whole journalism world is upside down, topsy-turvy, and nobody really knows how it's going to turn out. You know, our own local newspaper, The Beacon, you know, is getting smaller and smaller. It's not as big as it used to be. You know, they're hanging in there. But the Weekly Herald, which used to cover all three communities, Edmonds, Linwood, and Mount Lake Terrace, went out of business at the end of September. The Everett Herald, the Washington Post, just sold it to a chain of weekly newspapers. I have no idea what that means for them. We just don't know. So it's important work, and I really appreciate all the fact that you guys are here, that you read, that you're providing support. It is really important. And just talking on the growth phase, when I talked about readership growth, the other thing that's been very exciting for me, and a very good segue from the Weekly Herald, is I had an opportunity to acquire 2 other online sites in neighboring communities, and I did not seek that out. It was kind of ironic. I had My Edmonds News. I networked with the publishers of the website in Mount Lake Terrace and Linwood, and one by one, those 2 publishers had to give up their sites for a variety of reasons. And they each came to me, Mount Lake Terrace publisher came to me a year ago, the Linwood publisher came to me in November of last year, and said, do you want to acquire my site because I can't do it anymore? And of course, I'm thinking, well, yeah, that makes total sense. You know, we share a school district, we share a fire district, you know, there's so much, all of us kind of morph between those communities all the time. So I said, okay, that I have to find local editors, because I believe, you know, you have to have an editor who lives in the community, and I was able to do that. And, you know, from an economies of scale standpoint, from the advertising sales, it makes sense because you can have advertising opportunities in all 3. But it's a big, big thing that all of a sudden I've morphed into that I really did not, I mean, it wasn't what I was thinking when I first started this, when I got laid off 4 years ago. But it's exciting. I'm really excited about it, and I tell people all the time, the reason why I do it, getting back to part of the topic of my speech, the reason why I do all these crazy things like sitting at city council meetings and reporting on lost dogs. It's one of my favorite things ever is when I reunite a lost dog with its owner. It is the best. I mean, I just can't tell you. When you have a, you know, and oftentimes it's a little kid whose parents are emailing me and, oh my God, we've lost our dog, and can you post it on your website or tweet it out or put it on Facebook? And when we reconnect, that's just awesome. So I love that. I literally had somebody send me a photo of their lost keys. They did. They sent me a picture. I posted it. So, I'm not saying there's nothing I won't do, but I try to be of service when I can. So those are the kinds of things. I've also had an opportunity to write about a lot of really interesting stories. There's so many great works going on, so many great nonprofits, so many wonderful things going on. I did a call for some donations during the holidays. Scriber Lake High School, as many of you know, and I think, in fact, the Friends of the Library has been friends with Scriber Lake folks in the book that the kids wrote. I knew that was a need. And we sent out a call for donations and raised about $1,100 to provide gift cards for the families in need at Scriber Lake over the holidays. And it's just that kind of thing that really feeds my soul. And I love what I do, and that's why I'm here, that's why I'm doing it, that's why, even though I'm not really making a lot of money at it yet, I really want to continue because it's just so much fun, and I feel so good about it. And I just can't even describe it. I mean, my whole life, I've always had a job, but this is not a job. This is like my passion, and so I'm very grateful. And before I close, I just wanted to say thank you to the people in the audience who have really helped me, and that's Harry Gatchins, who's Citizen Harry from the website. For those of you who know, he writes a lot of information about just goings-on, and started working with me when he ran for city council one time and twice, and wrote about his experiences. And Jeanette Turner, taking notes furiously, who's been our arts reporter and all-around amazing support system. And of course, Doug and Carol, who do the wonderful Conkadoodle Kitchens, and Larry, who has been just jack of all trades, photographer and writer, and Maggie, who I also mentioned, and am I missing anybody else who is actually a writer? Oh, Denise. Denise was here somewhere. Denise from Flaunt Financial, who does, she's here somewhere, isn't she, Denise? Maybe she just came to introduce herself. Anyway, she was here. I hope I wasn't so boring, but she left. Anyway, Denise, who writes a financial column, came by. So, oh, and Janice. Hi, Janice. Janice Freeman, who has not written for My Edmonds News, but has been somebody I've known for a long time through Sustainable Edmonds, and kind of got me inspired to do some of the things that I'm doing. So, anyway, I'd be happy to take your questions, and thank you again for all your support. I can't tell you again how much I get out of doing what I do.